Welcome to the 4th Annual Tucson Festival of Books, one of the largest events of this kind in the country. I'm Toni Massaro from the University of Arizona College of Law, and I'm here to moderate the discussion with one of my favorite authors, and I suspect the reason you're here is that you feel the same way. He's absolutely fabulous, and before we get going, buy the book. Right. I want to first acknowledge with great gratitude the law firm of DeConcini, McDonald, Yetwin, and Lacey for sponsoring this event. A little shout out to one of the local fantastic firms here in Tucson, but especially notable for all of the public service and pro bono work that they do consistently over time. It's a premier firm, and we're grateful to them for making events like this possible. Please turn off your cell phones, and I want to tell you up front, the author is going to be available shortly after this session. If you go out of the Union and make a right turn to the Madden book signing area, Mr. Rosen, Professor Rosen, will be at Tent B. We were told to keep the introduction tight. I could go on at length, but the highlights are he's a professor at George Washington University, where he teaches constitutional law. You probably know him most as a commentator on legal affairs, in particular with the New Republic, where he's been since 1992. He's written for the New York Times Magazine. You can hear him occasionally on NPR, written for the Washington Post. He's the author of 6 terrific books and currently working on a new one on Justice Brandeis. He's consistently erudite, thoughtful, in terms of zeroing in on issues in a way that is both accessible to sophisticated lay people and spot on for those who are more familiar with the legal issues, which is an extraordinarily difficult thing to master. Some years ago, he was our guest here at the University of Arizona as the Marx lecturer, and I can tell you as somebody who was responsible for stewarding those guests that he's also one of the most gracious people ever to come to Tucson, and we're very delighted to have this public intellectual and stunningly prolific writer back here with us. Jeff, I want to talk about... They've captioned this, the innermost chambers, the Supreme Court, but we're going to focus in particular on, this afternoon in the limited time we have, on his most recent book. And that is co-edited with Benjamin Wittes, and it's titled Constitution 3.0, Freedom and Technological Change. It's a project out of the Brookings Institution Project on Technology and the Constitution. And here is the focus of it, the multiple ways in which technology is transforming who we are, who we think we are, how we interact, surveillance, ways in which we can identify you, locate you, look inside of you, and all of these things with respect to the legal implications, in particular with respect to the constitutional implications. Now, he's been working in this vineyard for some time, and this latest book just builds on the insights that are in his book, The Naked Crowd, which he published in 2004, and The Unwanted Gaze, which he published in 2000. Freedom and technological change covers a lot of ground. As I say, the internet, GPS tracking, surveillance, airport scans, cookies, brain imaging, DNA testing, 23andMe. Let's start with the internet and social media. And I'm going to start in, who is the boss of us these days? It's conventional for people to think of First Amendment invasions or restrictions on your freedom of speech as coming from the government. And in fact, in constitutional law, that is where it is located. Government intervention violates free speech, not private interventions. And yet, there's a really good question right now, which you've examined and looked at. Of whom should we be more afraid? The government, or an unregulated Mark Zuckerberg, or Nicole Wong, formerly of Google?
Wonderful question, Toni. And first, let me say how thrilled I was when I learned that you were going to be moderating this conversation. I had such a wonderful time when I came to the University of Arizona 5 years ago. We bonded over your wonderful constitutional scholarship and the superb job you did as dean, and I'm just really, I know that I couldn't be in better hands for this conversation.
Thanks.
So, yes, who to fear most? What do we do, ladies and gentlemen, living in a world where lawyers at Google and Facebook have more power over the future of privacy and free speech than any king or president or Supreme Court justice? This came home to me a few years ago when I went to Google and had a chance to interview the woman who has to be considered the free speech adjudicator for the entire world. Her name still is, although she's no longer playing this role, Nicole Wong, and her colleagues called her the Decider. Because she was the one who literally decided what went up and what came down, not only on Google.com, not only on each of the more than 150 search engines that Google runs in Germany and France and around the world, but also on YouTube, which Google owns. So Nicole Wong was the one who was woken up in the middle of the night by frantic calls from the Turkish Google employees who learned that the Turkish government has blocked Google in Turkey because they're Greek football fans who have a habit of saying that Kemal Ataturk, the founder of modern Turkey, was gay, which is not true, but it's illegal in Turkey. So these football fans put up these YouTube videos, and Nicole Wong has to decide, is this clearly illegal under Turkish law, in which case it comes down? Is it on the borderline of political criticism, in which case it might stay up? She's afraid of the safeties of her employees on the ground. Meanwhile, she doesn't speak Turkish and doesn't know how to get to this district judge in Turkey who's ordering that Google be blocked. And multiply that by criticisms of the Thai king, which is illegal in Thailand, or of Holocaust denial material illegal in Germany, and terrorism videos. The scope of the task was so overwhelming that she actually said it wasn't a job that she felt she could handle or wanted, and she's left recently for greener pastures. So what to do in this world, and that's just free speech, we'll be talking about privacy, but what to do in this world where, after all, the Constitution says Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech. The Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, but the Fourth Amendment only binds the government. It doesn't bind Mark Zuckerberg. And one of the persistent themes that a bunch of great authors we got together explore in this collection is how can we translate constitutional values into a world of new technologies where the Constitution doesn't formally apply.
Well, and it's not entirely new, is it? You know, think of the Newt Minow era and the thinking at that time with the advent of television and anticipating that this was going to be a potential huge information capture problem, right?
Yes, Newt Minow is a good reminder. This is the famous Federal Communications Commission chairman who warned that television was a vast wasteland, and proved to be correct. But Newt Minow's scruples look almost quaint. I mean, network television is a veritable Downton Abbey compared with the cacophony on the internet. And of course, Newt Minow's age was a world where the three broadcast networks controlled who spoke. It wasn't lawyers at Google, it was the head of ABC and CBS. Contrast that with the 1920s, the previous free speech era. Then it was the government putting Eugene Debs, candidate for president, in jail for criticizing the war. So we've moved from the government as the threat to the broadcast networks to now the lawyers at the internet service providers, and it's the ISP people who have a vastly more complicated task.
And of course, this show is to prove that it's not entirely a vast wasteland.
By definition, thanks to
that's
C-SPAN.
right.
We always say that whenever we appear.
So another thing that you've grappled with in your writing and have for a long time are the multiple ways in which we fear that technology can compromise in unprecedented ways reputation. And also freeze our identity. You know, many people, including you, have focused in particular on the global instantaneous impact of the internet and the persistence of it. I think most people, when they're young, commit mistakes. It's not that we stop committing them, but maybe the most grotesque ones happen when you're young.
Speak for yourself.
I think I was. And all advice is
Yeah.
Anyway. But the you know, the phrase "forever young," but do we really want to be forever callow?
This, actually, that doesn't sound so bad given the alternatives, but this problem of how to escape your digital past on the internet is so riveting because it pulls me in two completely separate directions. So on the one hand, my privacy instincts are concerned about the plight of all these young people who post drunken pictures from Cancun and are finding themselves fired or unable to get hired in the future because of it. There's this riveting story of a young woman who was a teacher in training in Pennsylvania a few years ago who posted a picture of herself on MySpace wearing a pirate's hat